Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera. Now we're at the stage where there's open confrontation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. What are your preferred options? An increased military pushback against Azerbaijan or a call for ceasefire and talks?
I would like to start off by clarifying something about your question, because in this particular case, Armenia is acting as the guarantor of security of Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh, and Azerbaijan launched a direct attack on Nagorno-Karabakh, and Armenia has certain obligations to provide the security of Nagorno-Karabakh, and in this context, Azerbaijan also started to strike settlements in the Republic of Armenia and the civilian population in the Republic of Armenia. The September 27 offensive of Azerbaijan on Nagorno-Karabakh began with shelling of civilian settlements, and this is a fact that we need to acknowledge. And then the rest of the answer to the question would be as follows. When there's an attack, when there's aggression, the very first task is to protect from that aggression and to stop that aggression, after which only will it be possible to talk about negotiations. In a situation in which there is an aggression, I can say with confidence that the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh will not retreat in the face of the aggression. At the same time, it's necessary to acknowledge that the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh has nothing but a peaceful solution, and confronting the aggression will de facto prove it.
But are you saying then that but before there is a peaceful solution, you're going to have to make some military gains?
As I said already, our task is to defend, because Azerbaijan launched an attack in the direction of Nagorno-Karabakh, and obviously the very first task of the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh is to defend against this aggression.
Okay, then what is the likelihood of a military political alliance, formal military political alliance with Nagorno-Karabakh?
We are discussing that possibility. That alliance actually de facto exists because we state that Armenia is the guarantor of security of Karabakh, and we need to think now about its future developments. And in our agenda, we do indeed have this point. And it's very important to note this situation has created a new reality, a new military political reality in our region. One component, as I said, is that for many years, Azerbaijan, after developing a military rhetoric, has now attacked Nagorno-Karabakh, and it has happened with Turkey's obvious support. And in the international media, there is already broad discussion of the fact that in the territories that it controls in Syria, Turkey is recruiting mercenaries and transporting them to our region, and therefore Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh need to increase our cooperation in the security field.
And would you go as far as recognizing an independent Nagorno-Karabakh?
There is that agenda as well, and that is an item in the agenda, and a decision will be taken or not taken depending on a variety of factors.
You mentioned Turkey in your answer there, and yes, Turkey has now come out firmly on the side of Azerbaijan, says it will support Azerbaijan, and has criticized your approach to Azerbaijan. But do you have evidence really that Turkey is going as far as supplying mercenaries?
The evidence of that is appearing in the international media day after day, one after another, in reputable sources such as The Guardian, Reuters. The relatives of these mercenaries are telling the stories, their family members are telling the stories. And specific individuals have testified. They have spoken to journalists and said that Turkey is recruiting those people, transporting them to Azerbaijan to take part in the war against Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh.
Let me repeat something to you written by Richard Kauslerich, a former US ambassador to Azerbaijan. He said this when this conflict started. He said the poor people of Armenia and Azerbaijan are paying for the price of uninspired leadership in Baku and Yerevan that refuse to seize opportunity after opportunity to peacefully deal with the conflict regarding Nagorno-Karabakh. Is he right? What could you have done differently to prevent this happening?
You know, essentially everything that needed to be done has been done. When I entered the office of the Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia, I proposed a formula as a basis for my policy on the Nagorno-Karabakh issue, saying that we have to agree that any settlement, any solution to the conflict has to be acceptable to the people of Armenia, to the people of Nagorno-Karabakh, and to the people of Azerbaijan. And this formula is something which I proposed as a basis for settlement of the conflict. Unfortunately, Azerbaijan, starting from the mid-2000s, has essentially been advancing the military philosophy and policy as an option for resolution, and is refusing in any way to engage in mutual concessions. And I think what is significant here is a dictatorial government, such as the one established in Azerbaijan, is not inclined to make mutual concessions, and only democratically elected governments are capable of engaging in or proposing mutual concessions, such as the one which I proposed in that formula I just mentioned. And instead, in return, the president of Azerbaijan essentially said that the solution of the Karabakh issue can happen only and only within the frames of Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, which means that the issue of Karabakh would return to the status quo where it began in 1988, in the days of the Soviet Union. Therefore, it would be impossible to resolve any conflict by returning it to the point where it began.
Given that historical reference, yes, I understand, and I know you probably have not much time for reflection at the moment. You're busy handling this day to day. But have you looked back and said, why have we got to where we are today? Could I have done something differently that would have stopped this outbreak of violence and this loss of life?
For that, there is only one option: to yield to Azerbaijan's blackmail and threats, which for Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh cannot be acceptable. Here is one example. Going to some well-known events in world history, you could ask, what could the US government have done to prevent 9/11 from happening? And if this comparison seems to you like an exaggeration, I would tell you that just 2 months ago, official representative of the Azerbaijani Ministry of Defense threatened to strike the Armenian nuclear power plant. What needs to be done? What is it that needs to be done to keep somebody from uttering those threats?
Well, look, when you came to power after the Velvet Revolution, particularly from Azerbaijan, we were hearing there were high hopes that after your predecessor there would be a move towards peace, and it's just not happened. You have, well, from their perspective, not delivered what they hoped you would.
After the revolution that took place in Armenia, there was a lot more hope in Azerbaijan that the wave of democratization would also reach Azerbaijan. But those hopes were not fulfilled, because the president of Azerbaijan continuously uses the Karabakh issue to justify his dictatorial rule. When the Velvet Revolution happened in Armenia, in Azerbaijani society, more hope emerged that a similar revolution would also occur in Azerbaijan. But To prevent that revolution and to carry on with the dictatorial rule, Azerbaijan intensified its bellicose rhetoric, which led to today's situation.
You've been on the phone a couple of times with Vladimir Putin. How have those conversations gone? Can you let us into the tone, the measure, the content of those conversations?
Over this time, I've had phone calls with the President of France, the Chancellor of Germany, with the President of the Islamic Republic of Iran, with the UN General Secretary, twice with Vladimir Putin. I had 2 phone calls, but I think I will be having more phone calls with the French President and other leaders, and we discuss the ongoing situation. We discuss the development of events, and we discuss the possibilities of our cooperation in that respect.
But the one that matters is Vladimir Putin. What he thinks, what he says, is the one that matters most to you, isn't it?
Russia is a co-chair country of the OSCE Minsk group, and with Russia, Armenia has deep partnership in the security field, including the fact that there's a Russian military base in Armenia, and there are certain treaties in effect, which are in force, in effect, and perhaps the agenda of our discussions is more diverse in that respect.
Well, do you want Moscow to be neutral? For Azerbaijan, they have had Recep Tayyip Erdogan has clearly stated his support for Azerbaijan. Would you like to see something similar come from Vladimir Putin in your favor?
Well, you see, here's our position that, first of all, Russia, as a co-chair country of the OSCE Minsk group, should take all measures for security and peace in the region and for resolution of the Karabakh conflict. Russia has with Armenia commitments in the security field, and to be precise, cooperation in the security field, and that is one of the items in our agenda.
Would you want to see Russian peacekeepers, for example, in Nagorno-Karabakh?
Well, you see, those issues could be discussed in the context of the wider resolution within the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairmanship.
President Aliyev says that you've been provoking him. You've been allowing the Armenian diaspora to settle in Nagorno-Karabakh. You've been encouraging it. He's been left with no option. They have this long list of grievances. It's their territory. You've done nothing to try and resolve this conflict. So that is why we are where we're at today.
Look, you see, those allegations of the Armenian government resettling people from the diaspora in Artsakh are groundless allegations for 2 reasons. Firstly, the Armenian government has got nothing to do with Nagorno-Karabakh's territorial development, and secondly, from Armenia and from Nagorno-Karabakh for many years, many Armenians emigrated from their homes, and those people have lived in different parts of the world, in Russia, in Europe, in the Middle East, in the United States of America. And I do not preclude that some of those people might return to live in their homes. To portray it as something unusual would be illogical.
Provocation, not unusual. The president says it's not unusual to allow people to go back. It's a provocation. You're provoking.
Well, you see, if anyone after 15 or 20 years ago emigrated from their homes, or 30 years back emigrated from their homes, and are returning to their homes to live in their homes, is that provocation? What is provocative about it? Could you explain to me?
Well, then you have also the allegations of the war crimes committed by the Armenian forces back in the late 80s and early 90s in Nagorno-Karabakh that the European Court of Human Rights has catalogued, and again a failure to address those issues.
No, that's a misunderstanding. Where did you get that? Where is that information coming from? It's just Azerbaijani propaganda. It's another one of the tools of Azerbaijani propaganda, because in the European Court of Human Rights, there are other judgments and decisions that actually blame Azerbaijan for specific and concrete crimes. We can also look at the infamous case of Ramil Safarov, the Azerbaijani officer who was taking part in a, together with Armenian officers, they were taking part in a training course of NATO, and he killed an Armenian officer in his sleep with an axe. For many years, Azerbaijan was developing anti-Armenian propaganda, and this is one of the consequences. And that act happened in Hungary, in Budapest. The court of Budapest convicted Safarov to life in prison, after which, after serving 8 years in prison, he was extradited to Azerbaijan, where Aliyev issued an order releasing him, and there was a process of nationwide glorification of the person. This one episode really illustrates the whole history of the Karabakh conflict. The context of today's events is also described with this. Today, many Ramil Safarovs have attacked people who were sleeping peacefully, numerous Armenians. This is the story that is happening.
Maybe on top of all of that, though, we can say that the UN General Assembly demands the unconditional withdrawal of all Armenian forces from the occupied territories of Azerbaijan and...
Wait 1 second, please. I beg your pardon. Have you actually read the Security Council resolutions? If you've personally read it, it's very important that whatever we're referring to, whatever we're citing, we should read what the text says. And that text says the following: that Azerbaijan violated the ceasefire agreement, and the situation that subsequently emerged was a consequence of breach of the internationally reached commitments of Azerbaijan. That's very important. That resolution which you cite actually refers to a specific event at a specific point in time. After that, the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairmanship was formed, and all nuances of the Karabakh issue have been discussed in that forum. In the negotiations which happen in the frames of the OSCE Minsk Group, it is in those negotiations, as it is a result, it is these negotiations that should result in solving all the issues.
Okay. Last year, Prime Minister, August 2019, you went to Nagorno-Karabakh and you told the crowd there, Artsakh is Armenia, period, leading those crowd in chants for unification. Do you regret that now in retrospect? Was that the right thing to do then?
We should again note the facts. As I told you already, I proposed a formula, and I proposed that we should undertake to seek solutions that will be acceptable to the people of Armenia, to the people of Karabakh, and to the people of Azerbaijan. And I was the first leader involved in this conflict who said that any solution of the Karabakh issue should be acceptable also to the other side. And the meaning of the proposed formula was to get the Azerbaijani president to adopt a similar approach so that we could have a totally different and new situation in the negotiations of the Karabakh issue. In response to that, the president of Azerbaijan continued the bellicose statement by saying that the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh has only one solution, and that is Karabakh is a part of Azerbaijan. And I noted, and I made a statement to illustrate that the approach of the Azerbaijani president is impermissible given especially that in 1988, the autonomous region of Nagorno-Karabakh, through its Supreme Council, expressed the will to join Armenia, the Republic of Armenia. Besides, I would like to highlight that Nagorno-Karabakh cannot be Azerbaijan for a simple reason. At the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union, just like Azerbaijan gained independence from the Soviet Union, in exactly the same manner, the autonomous region of Nagorno-Karabakh exercised its right, constitutional and legal right, of the then Soviet Union to gain independence from the Soviet Union. And Azerbaijan's position on the Karabakh issue boils down to restoring, or to a need to restore the Soviet-era status quo, which is simply impossible.
Prime Minister, time is against us, but one question before we finish on the domestic situation. You remain very popular, and the popularity that brought you to power during the Velvet Revolution is still there. Not as popular as you were, we understand. There have been some small protests against tax policy, tax reform, calls for the education minister.
I'm sorry, did you do an opinion poll?
No, I'm just reflecting what we've seen in local coverage. You are popular, I give you that, Prime Minister. You remain very popular.
No, I'm not insisting. I'm just trying to say that the protests happened the day after I was elected Prime Minister. So, oh, by the way, in a democratic society, protests, demonstrations, assemblies are not strange. It would be good, for instance, if Azerbaijan had protests under the same circumstances in the same environment as Armenia.
Let me just very quickly finish the question, though, the point being that, and also we have to mention that the COVID infection rate is very high here, and you've had a big challenge getting on top of that. The question is, do you worry for your own popularity that if you mishandle this conflict, if it doesn't go your way, then you yourself are going to suffer in your position as Prime Minister?
Well, you see, I reached the position of the Prime Minister not to defend my popularity, but to serve the national interests of my country and my people, and to defend the dreams of my people and my country. So, along this path, I'm absolutely not interested in my person.
Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Yes, sir. Thank you.